I'll never forget the flash of panic when my father-in-law burst into the delivery room, his fist raised, just as I was about to meet my daughter. In that moment, I realized the man I'd welcomed into our lives was capable of real violence and that protecting my baby would mean confronting a lifetime of hidden abuse. What followed was a desperate chokehold, a secret wedding day incident I'd only just learned about, and a heart-wrenching decision to cut off the man who once controlled us, costing my mother-in-law her marriage but freeing her spirit. From hospital security to a courtroom restraining order, a shocking family confession, and even George's own stroke, we shattered the cycle of violence, reclaimed our future, and built a safer, stronger home for Lily. I was in labor when my father-in-law burst into the delivery room and tried to hit me. My husband restrained him, and the baby went into distress. I never expected to write this post. 3 weeks ago, I 24F was in the delivery room with my husband, Caleb 27M, when my father-in-law, George 54M, burst into the room uninvited and tried to hit me. Yes, you read that correctly. He attempted to assault me while I was in the middle of delivering our child. My husband grabbed him in a chokehold before he could touch me. Hospital security removed him, and the stress sent our baby into distress. Now, our family has completely fallen apart, and I need advice on what to do next. To understand how we got here, I need to give some background. Caleb and I have been married for 2 years. From the beginning of our relationship, his father has been a problem. At first, I wondered if I was being overly sensitive because of my history. I cut contact with my own father when I was 18 due to years of emotional abuse that I won't detail here. Because of this, I initially questioned whether I was judging George unfairly. It didn't take long to realize that George was genuinely problematic. He makes racist comments at family gatherings. He belittles Caleb's career choices. He speaks to his wife, Martha 52F, like she's beneath him. I get along wonderfully with Martha. She's become a dear friend to me over the years, which makes this situation even more complicated. I want to be clear that I don't have issues with men in general. My stepfather has been an amazing support in my life. My brother and I are incredibly close. My problem isn't with men. It's with abusive people. Last year, Caleb and I discovered I was pregnant. We were overjoyed, but also cautious. I had experienced 2 miscarriages before, so we decided to keep the news private for the first 3 months. We only told our mothers, swearing them to secrecy. Martha respected our wishes completely. When we finally announced the pregnancy, George took our privacy decision personally. He told Caleb that I obviously had issues with men because of my history with my father. When we decided not to find out the baby's sex before birth because we wanted it to be a surprise, George made a horrific accusation. He told Caleb that the real reason we didn't want to know was because I planned to terminate the pregnancy if it was a boy. I was stunned when Caleb told me what his father had said. For the record, I was secretly hoping for a boy. I have wonderful men in my life and would have been thrilled with a son. We simply wanted the surprise factor of not knowing until birth. My pregnancy was physically difficult. I struggled to gain weight due to severe morning sickness. I experienced cramping and occasional bleeding that required bed rest at various points. My doctor monitored me closely, and despite the challenges, we made it to 43 weeks, which my doctor described as unusual but not concerning given our continuous monitoring. Throughout my pregnancy, George's behavior worsened. When he learned I was planning a natural birth, he complained about my decision constantly. He kept saying that if a C-section was good enough for Martha, it should be good enough for me, conveniently leaving out that Martha's C-section was medically necessary due to severe complications. The procedure was so difficult that it led to a hysterectomy, which is why Caleb is an only child. George's comments became increasingly cruel. He told Caleb that our baby probably wouldn't live long, knowing full well about my previous losses. He said my pregnancy would make me fat and that Caleb would become less attracted to me. The comments went on, each one more hurtful than the last. Throughout all this, Caleb typically responded by saying his dad was just joking or by changing the subject. He spent his entire life dealing with George's behavior by filtering it out or mentally checking out of conversations. I understood this was a coping mechanism, but it meant George's behavior continued unchecked. After particularly nasty comments early in our relationship, I made the decision to minimize my time around George. Caleb supported this choice, though. He still visited his parents regularly. As my pregnancy progressed, we had serious discussions about George's temper and agreed that our child would never be left alone with him. Now to the birth. I went into labor 3 weeks ago. We went to the hospital, where I planned to deliver with minimal intervention, supported by my midwife. The labor was difficult, long, and painful. After about 13 hours, I was exhausted but making progress. I had specifically instructed the hospital staff not to allow anyone into the delivery room except those I had approved. This was partly because I feared my estranged father might somehow find out I was in labor and show up. The hospital assured me they would respect my wishes. Despite these precautions, 13 hours into my labor, the door burst open and George and Martha entered the room. I couldn't believe it. Here I was in the most vulnerable position imaginable, dealing with contractions from a baby that we later learned weighed 11 pounds when the one person I absolutely did not want to see walked in. I lost control. After 13 hours of labor pain and months of his verbal abuse, something in me snapped. I shouted at him, calling him an abusive person and demanding he leave immediately. I told him nothing was coming out of my body while he was in the room, and that if he wanted to meet his grandchild, he needed to get out now. George turned purple with rage. He lunged toward me and raised his hand. It was clear he intended to hit me, though he hesitated when he seemed to realize we were in a hospital setting. Before he could decide what to do, Caleb grabbed him from behind and put him in a chokehold. Caleb is significantly larger than his father, about 50 pounds heavier, and 6 inches taller. The look in Caleb's eyes made me think he might seriously hurt his father if no one intervened. Thankfully, hospital security arrived quickly and removed George. Martha stayed behind, apologizing profusely and crying. The stress of the confrontation caused our baby to go into distress. I began panicking, which stalled my labor. The medical team had to intervene with various techniques to help me progress again. 2 hours after George was removed, our daughter was born with Caleb, my mother, and Martha present. She was healthy despite the complications, and we named her Lily. After leaving the hospital, we told George directly that we didn't want him around me or the baby. He ignored us and showed up at our house with Martha a few days later. Caleb physically blocked him from entering while allowing Martha to visit. Since then, Martha has come alone several times, but George has not returned. I want George completely out of our lives just as I cut off my own father, but I don't want to lose Martha. If we cut George off, Martha loses her caretaker and financial support. Caleb would lose both parents, and Lily would know only my mother as a grandparent. Yet I can't risk our daughter around someone who tried to assault me during childbirth. Part of me wants to report George's attempted assault to the police. Our state's 3 strikes law means he'd likely face long prison time on top of 2 prior convictions for domestic violence. But if I press charges, Martha would lose her husband and her only support system. I don't want Lily's birth forever tied to sending her grandfather to prison. It's been 2 weeks since I shared our story, and there have been major developments. The morning after I posted, Caleb approached me, exhausted from caring for Lily and sleepless nights. He revealed that George's hospital outburst wasn't the first time he'd tried to intimidate me. At our wedding reception 2 years ago, George drunk made threatening movements when I stepped away to get drinks. Caleb's cousin Jake intervened, but they agreed not to tell me to avoid ruining our wedding day. Learning this shattered me. For 2 years, I'd unknowingly been around someone who wanted to harm me. We spoke for hours that day, tears and all. Caleb admitted he'd spent his life normalizing George's abuse. Seeing him try to hit me while I was giving birth was his wake-up call. Together, we decided to cut all contact with George. The cycle of abuse ends with us. Next, Caleb visited Martha alone. To our surprise, Martha confessed she'd planned to leave George for months. She'd secured accessible housing and saved money without his knowledge. The hospital incident was the final straw. She moved into her new apartment with our help last week. George's reaction was explosive. He pounded on our door, shouting that I'd poisoned his family. We called the police. They advised filing a restraining order, which we did immediately, citing the hospital incident and Caleb's statement. The temporary order was granted. We're awaiting the hearing for a permanent one. Martha is adjusting well. She visits Lily regularly, and her bond with Caleb is stronger now that George can't control them. We've decided to hold off on pressing criminal charges for now because the restraining order offers some protection, and Martha needs time to establish her new life before testifying. A month later, things have escalated. The restraining order hearing took place 2 weeks ago. Caleb, Martha, and I all testified. The judge granted a 1-year order prohibiting George from coming within 500 feet of our home, Lily, Caleb, or me. 3 days after the hearing, Martha's new apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her belongings were scattered. There were no witnesses or cameras, and the police couldn't prove George's involvement, but we all knew. Martha installed a security system and refused to be driven by fear. Then Caleb's aunt reached out with shocking family history. In his early 20s, George dated a woman who ended up hospitalized from a fall down the stairs, but the aunt had witnessed him push a pregnant woman. Hospital staff suspected abuse, but Martha denied it at the time. Worse, George had pushed pregnant Martha at 9 months, causing her emergency C-section and hysterectomy. Caleb was devastated. The story of his birth had been a lie. Armed with this evidence, old letters and photos, we added to our police report. A detective was assigned and interviewed Martha, who confirmed decades of abuse. The DA is now reviewing whether to bring new charges under the 3 strikes law. Meanwhile, George has retaliated by harassing Caleb at work, spreading rumors in the community, and creating fake social media accounts to harass me. Caleb's nightmares resurfaced as he recalled suppressed childhood memories. He struggles with guilt for not protecting his mother sooner. We've installed security cameras at both homes and informed Lily's pediatrician and childcare providers that George has no access. Martha began therapy and joined a survivor support group. Despite her challenges, she says she feels freer than she has in 30 years. We're meeting with the district attorney next week to decide on pressing charges. I'll update after that. 2 months later, we've reached a resolution, though not the one we expected. Legal outcome. We decided to press charges for attempted assault at the hospital. With witness statements and George's criminal history, the DA felt confident. George was arrested, charged, denied bail under the 3 strikes law, and remained in custody awaiting trial. 2 weeks later, he suffered a massive stroke in jail, leaving him partially paralyzed with severe cognitive impairment. The DA is proceeding, but his attorney argues he's incompetent to stand trial. He's now in a state long-term care facility for inmates with medical needs. Family dynamics. Martha visited him once. He didn't recognize her and became agitated. She decided not to return, focusing on her healing. Some relatives apologized after learning the full history. Others accused us of abandonment when he needed us most. Caleb channeled his childhood trauma into therapy and now advocates for domestic violence awareness, especially for child witnesses. Martha is thriving. She's active in her community and even started dating a respectful widower. Lily is growing beautifully. She's 5 months old, hitting milestones, and filling our home with joy. We maintain no contact with George, regardless of his medical state. The restraining order remains in force. George showed no remorse, and his stroke doesn't erase the danger he posed, especially to Lily. Martha and my mother have become Lily's 2 loving grandmothers. Caleb, now a devoted father, reminds me daily that the cycle of abuse can be broken. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to remove toxic people from your life, even family. Our future will be defined not by George's actions but by the safety and love we build for Lily. Thank you to everyone who offered support. While our story doesn't end in fairy tale reconciliation, we found peace in our decisions and hope in our new family.